better off if you can squeeze around this way, because if I go that way, I start to get a lot of feedback off the
They get shot.
speaker. Okay, enjoying the 21st century. You all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to take about 15 minutes or so of your time just to talk to you on musketry of the 17th century. This is sort of equipment that was in use at the Battle of the Boyne here in 1690. It will include a loading and firing demonstration, and at the end I'll be available for any questions you may have. The first piece I'd like to show you is this here. This is a matchlock musket. These sort of guns saw service all through the 1600s. Now the Boyne here would have been the most common firearm in use. Both sides had them and in large numbers. Like I said, this will include a loading and firing demonstration. This gun is nearly ready to fire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a shot away with this one now and hopefully whet your appetite for a little bit more. Before I do that, I'd just like to point out that these guns do go off with quite a bang. So I will be withdrawing to a firing point to take the shot. We have tested sound levels. Once you remain behind the barriers, the sound level is quite safe. I'd just like to point out, if anybody got any babe in arms or dogs? No? Okay, they might get a fright when it goes off. So I will just leave the 21st century. Bear with me.
No, I shouldn't have completely different. So shouldn't have been
Shouldn't have used
He won't be shitting up there.
See if I realize the ball goes.
No, not like a shitting you, there's yellow ones. Yeah, people in here.
So did me.
Awesome.
So as you imagine, we're a lot of deaf musketeers.
I'm very excited about all this.
These guns have their origins in the hand cannons of 9th and 10th century China, which were basically just an iron tube. But by the late 1600s, some of them are getting quite sophisticated and are easily recognisable to our modern eye as being some sort of firearm. Now what is a musket, I hear you ask? A musket is a very simple firearm. Basically consists of an iron or steel tube, barrel, which has been plugged and sealed at one end. Down near the plugged end, a small hole has been drilled through the wall of the tube. It's only about a millimetre and a half in diameter. Underneath that hole on the outside has been affixed a small metal plate, which is a dish or bowl shaped. This is called a pan. So to fire a musket, you first load a measure of gunpowder and the lead ball, a musket ball, down the barrel. You ram them down. You then prime the pan. That is, you use a fine grade of gunpowder or priming powder. You fill the pan up with that. You then explode the priming powder. That explosion sends a flame shooting through the touch hole. That ignites the gunpowder in the barrel, which explodes in turn. And that explosion sends the musket ball flying out the barrel towards the target. Now the matchlock takes its name from the method it uses to ignite the priming powder. Pretty much most muskets do. This is match. What is called slow match. It's just a hemp cord which has been soaked in a saltpeter solution. That's potassium nitrate for any chemists amongst you. So once it's lit, it'll smoulder away. It's like a cigar. Even builds up ash on the end of it. The lock is all this mechanism here. It's a trigger, this arm here called the serpentine, and the internal levers and springs. It's all referred to as the lock. It was called a lock because the early versions of these resemble the inside of the door lock, hence matchlock. So to fire the matchlock, I load the gunpowder and ball down the barrel, ram them down, close the pan cover, blow off my match, fix the match in the serpentine. Some technical difficulties. Okay, we'll sit in the serpentine. I then test, make sure it's going to hit the right place in the pan. Open the pan. Prime. And ever hear the expression of flash in a pan? Well, that's the original flash in a pan. The term comes from musketry, and it means a misfire. The powder in the pan has exploded, the charge in the barrel hasn't gone off. In this case, it's unloaded. And that's the origin of the term flash in a pan. Now, sometimes I would deliberately flash the pan to dry out moisture in the barrel, like the dew overnight or the rain. Another term that comes from musketry, you ever hear the expression lock, stock and barrel? Well, the lock, as I said, is all this mechanism here, trigger and serpentine. The stock is the timber. The barrel is your tube, it's your barrel. You got everything, when you got all those, when you got all three, you can assemble a firearm. You got everything, lock, stock and barrel. That's where the term comes from. Now, a matchlock is a very simple weapon, so it's a very reliable weapon. It pretty much works every time. Even if the arm gets broken or trigger or anything gets damaged in the mechanism, I can fire the gun simply by touching the match off the pan. It's very sturdily built. This one weighs about 11 pounds. Makes a very effective club. And when musketeers would close in for hand-to-hand fighting, they'd be given the order to reverse muskets, and they would then use it like so. Nice piece of reinforced steel on the club plate as well, for jabbing with. A fine weapon as the matchlock is, very popular with soldiers, does have some disadvantages. The first is rain. The match gets wet, it won't light or it will go out. Now in sunny Spain that may not be such a big problem, but here in a country like Ireland we get so much rain, especially in the good weather, that can be a big problem. Another point about this gun is that I can't carry this around ready to fire at a moment's notice, so I have to stop and light the match. Now, I'd carry the match normally in about 3 foot, 1 metre length, tied around the belt. Both ends are kept lit as a precaution. When you fire the gun, you can occasionally blow the end out, so you end up lighting one end off the other. So I would burn through about 3 feet of match in 20-25 minutes. So in an hour I'd be burning through about 9 feet of match. In a 12-hour day, say patrolling or on guard, I burn through how many feet of match? Any mathematicians? How many? 36. 9 feet of match an hour at 12 hours a day? 108. That's a lot of, thank you. That's a lot of match. Okay, so it's not very practical from that point of view. Another point about the matchlock is it's very dangerous to have around where there's large quantities of gunpowder, such as near powder wagons or the artillery crews, the artillery teams on the field. They would have a lot of gunpowder and open barrels. So if you got guys walking around one of these on a windy day, sparks blowing off the match, or they just put it down in the wrong place. Accidents were not uncommon. But during the 1600s, this gun started to be replaced by a different musket. And that was a flintlock musket. Now the flintlocks were not a new invention, they have been around for some years. But they were mainly in use by certain units such as cavalry and fusiliers. But by the 1670s, 1680s, they're starting to filter down into the line infantry regiments in armies across Western Europe. And like the matchlock, the flintlock takes its name from the method it uses to ignite the priming powder. In this case, it uses a small piece of aged flint striking a hardened steel plate. That generates sparks, which ignites the priming powder. Now the flint on this gun is only about 3/4 of an inch square, and that's it there. It's held clamped in the jaws on that arm there. Okay. there. It's clamped. There's a piece of leather around it to stop it being crushed. This is the plate it strikes against, the frizzen plate. The frizzen is actually L-shaped. It's on a spring, so it flicks back and forth. That's the plate it'll strike against to generate the sparks. So to fire the flintlock, I load the powder and ball down the barrel, ram them down. I then move this arm, which is called a cock, because it looks in profile a bit like a cockerel's head, and its motion is similar to a chicken pecking. This is where we get the term cock a gun. This is where it comes from. So I'll move this back to the first position, which is half cock. Now that's now held against tension against the spring internally, but it's not on full tension yet. I then prime the pan. Close the pan. Now, to fire this gun, I just need to move the cock back to the second position, which is full cock. When I squeeze the trigger, the spring internally will release. This will fly forward. The flint will strike this steel plate, the frizzen plate, and then two things happen. Because this is moving forward, it pushes the frizzen forward, thereby opening the pan. Because it's also moving down, the flint scrapes against the steel plate, generating sparks. Those sparks fall into the now open pan and ignite the priming powder, hopefully. These things misfire a hell of a lot more than a matchlock will. After that, the operation is the same. The explosion of the priming powder will send the flame shooting through the touch hole, ignite the charge in the barrel. That explodes in turn and sends the musket ball on its merry way. Let's give that a shot. These things misfire a hell of a lot more than the matchlock does. And again. There you go. Purely on basis, the more you have, the more goes wrong. Now these guns solve some of the problems associated with the matchlock. I can fire this gun in all but the heaviest of rain to keep my powder dry, pan closed, just a bit of care, make sure no water gets into that. I can still use this gun in the wet. It's also a lot safer to have around where there's a lot of gunpowder. Some of the first soldiers to be equipped with the flintlock, the type of soldier called a fusilier. You probably recognise that name, you still hear it in the titles of regiments and armies today. Originally, fusiliers were troops who were armed with a flintlock. The name comes from the French word fusil, French flintlock. The fusiliers were originally men who were assigned to guard the powder supply and the artillery teams' crews on the battlefield. Armies would always keep an eye on the enemy's guns to see if they couldn't capture them or destroy them. So they had infantry units assigned to protect them. Of course, rather than having men walking around with naked flame around barrels of gunpowder, they're armed with a flintlock instead. I used the term half-cock earlier. I can carry this gun around all day long ready to fire. I just have to put it to full cock, squeeze the trigger. So with the barrel loaded, half cock, frizz closed. Hear the expressions, something go off half cock, do something when they're not ready. There's another term that comes from musketry. Half cock is a safety. It's the first position there. If I squeeze the trigger, nothing's supposed to happen. But the parts can wear inside. If the gun gets a bang, it can jump out of half cock. In this case, it doesn't work. So the gun could go off, goes off half cocked, goes off when they're not ready. As regards the ammunition, and loadout for these weapons, you're probably familiar with the image of the modern day soldier with webbing and pouches for his magazines, slips, and belts of machine gun ammunition strewn around the neck. 17th century soldier did something similar. Carried one of these. This is called a belt of charges, or bandoliers we call it today. And this is worn over one shoulder, and all these little buckles hang down. Now in each of these buckles is enough gunpowder for one shot. The oil, or the wood on the bottle would be oiled or waxed, make it weatherproof, stop the powder getting damp. The caps are made of materials of wood, copper, in this case they're lead. These are all materials that won't generate a spark when I'm tapping the powder down the barrel. The last thing I want is a spark at that point. It can blow my hand off. Down here, hanging off the end, is a slightly different bottle with a lead nozzle. This is for the priming powder, so this is a priming flask. Same thing I've been using this flask here for. Here's a pouch, and that will contain a musket ball shot. Should be going in here, so I'm just building it. There we go. So this is the bullet, this is a projectile. And it's about 3/4 of an inch in diameter. It's made of lead. And I can get 12 of these from 1 pound of lead. That makes it a 12 gauge. If any of you are familiar with shotguns, you recognise that size. The 12 gauge is probably the most common bore shotgun in use today, which is a calibre that's been around for hundreds of years. But during the 17th century, a new type of soldier had made its appearance on the battlefield and become more commonplace. And that was a dragoon. A dragoon is a mounted infantryman. The dragoons ride into battle on horseback, dismount, form up and commence firing. The dragoons are very useful soldiers for a commander to have, because you can move them around the battlefield much faster than men on foot. Their equivalent today would be helicopter-borne troops, some sort of rapid reaction force. The dragoon regiments were also cheaper to raise and maintain than regular cavalry units, which made them popular as well. But they could also carry out a lot of functions of the cavalry units. Now, while the bandolier works fine when I'm on foot, walking around, leisurely pace, I'm on horseback, slightly different story. Horses at a walk is fine. I go into a trot, into a canter, and God forbid into a gallop, you can see that I start to have a lot of problems. Okay? I have a bad bandolier day. The caps have come off, because there's a lot of gunpowder, the bottles are all knotted around each other. It's a bit of a mess. So a new method of packaging the ammunition was developed initially for horse troops, and then it filtered down into all the infantry. And that was a cartridge. You see here I'm wearing a leather satchel. It's a cartridge box. Inside the cartridge box is a block of timber with a number of holes drilled in it. In this case it's 24. In each of these is a tube of paper. This is your cartridge. If you ever see cartridge paper in a stationery suppliers, this is where it comes from. It's a particular weight of paper that was used to make cartridges with. Now inside each of these tubes of paper is enough gunpowder for one shot, but it also has the musket ball sitting on top. So it's my ammunition. It's a barrel load in one handy, convenient package. So, musket in one hand, cartridge in the other. I need to tear open the cartridge. Any idea what I got to do? Bite the bullet. Ever hear people say I just bite the bullet, get on with something pleasant? That's what I got to do. Take the end of the cartridge, clamp down on the lead ball inside the cartridge, tear open the cartridge. So. Okay. So. Lead ball and that, cartridge is open. This is one of the reasons why soldiers have to have good teeth. Okay. I now tip, powder, and barrel. Push, and in. I then spit the ball into the barrel. Wherever. No confession to make. These are blanks, so all I've got is some paper and some gunpowder. No. See you then. It's savoury rather than sweet if you're interested. Okay, so with the musket ball and paper, gunpowder, ram. And return. Very important that I return the ramrod. Without it, the gun's useless. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and get 3 shots away as fast as I can. Standard of the day was 1 minute for 3 shots. So I'll see, I'm rusty, but I'll see what I can do. I also like to point out again that these guns do go off with quite a bang. So I will be withdrawing to the firing point. Once you remain behind the barriers, the sound levels are quite safe. Health safety notice. Okay, so bear with me.
No, no, take the picture when he said go. Go. Yeah, got one. Take it now. I'll say go. I'll say go. He says no. Okay, the music is good, so you can get the one. He's ready here.
You're dead.
And it may seem very slow, but you got to remember the enemy was doing exactly the same thing. He used the same sort of weapon, so his rate of fire was about the same. So it all evened things out. And let me see. Yep. Yeah, come on. And normally at this point, we would offer a fresh, crisp €20 note to a volunteer to stand underneath a red beech tree with a cauliflower on their head. Yeah, we going? Go on. Anybody else? There's no army saying that a volunteer is somebody who didn't understand the question. Obviously it's not the case here because this man knows it'll be the easiest €20 he'll ever make. The effective range of these guns is 100 to 150 yards. That's from roughly where you're standing to the first beech tree and then out to the red.
There's no rifle in the bottom.
At this range, I'd be lucky to hit the tree, never mind anybody standing underneath it or a cauliflower. But that didn't matter. These guns were not accurate, they're smooth bores. I'm not firing at one man, however. I'll be firing at hundreds to my front. And if I fire, say, the chest of that man there at 100 yards, I might hit that man in the leg. Chances are, 100 yards, I hit nobody. Didn't matter if that man's down with a shot in the leg. He's not returning fire, so that's a result. The guns get more accurate as the armies close, advance in on each other. At 50 yards, I would hit a man-sized target 6 times out of 10 anyway with one of those guns. Armies of the period would form up, the cannons would be moved into position, commence firing. The infantry would organise into their regiments and battalions. The cavalry would take position to the rear or on the flanks, wait for their opportunity. The infantry would then march to within firing distance, possibly one, possibly both sides. They would open fire, fire, advance, reload, fire, advance, reload, and that will continue until we're maybe 25, 30 yards apart. The final volleys will be fired, and they're deadly at that range. The guns are accurate, so you don't want to waste time doing that. Maybe 1 or 2 volleys would be typical. Musketeers would then be given the order to club muskets, fixed bayonets, the swords would be drawn, and the battle would then go to hand-to-hand combat. Didn't always get to that stage. There were occasions where one army might decide they'd had enough, shoulder arms, and leave the field in good array. Other times they would just run for their lives and leave the field in disarray.
King James's army.
Covers all I've got for you by way of talk. If any of you have any questions you'd like to ask, please feel free. Yeah?
Do you remember on that flintlock you were saying that it doesn't work with the ramrod?
No, you have to make sure to replace the ramrod.
Yeah.
If you don't have the, well, if you lose it,
Yeah.
or if you leave it in the barrel and fire it, you just manage to disarm yourself. The gun's useless without a ramrod. You can't. Yeah.
Okay.
Further questions?
Was the bayonet ever used at the Battle of Boyne?
Yes, I think it's one of the earliest recorded. It's this plug bayonet was the type in use at the time. I think it's one of the earliest recorded in Ireland.
You see the first weapon you were shooting,
The matchlock.
what was the firing rate of that? You done what, 3 in a minute with the second one? What would be with the first one?
Probably about 2 a minute, maybe, yeah. It's just because you've got a naked flame,
Yeah.
there's a whole sequence. I think there's actually about, from the manuals in period, I think there's maybe 29 steps to actually doing it, and it's all designed to keep the flame away from the gunpowder.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got a slower rate of
Slower
fire.
rate.
It is, however, more reliable, and I much prefer firing that to the flintlock.
Are they replica them weapons, or
Pardon?
are they replica weapons? They're not the original ones, are they?
No, God no. I wish.
Yeah.
No, they're replicas.
Replicas.
Yeah.
Who would have manufactured those guns at the time? Would there have been
An armor.
an armed?
Yeah, there was, just like today, you have factories, they were imported. If you didn't have your own local firearms industry, you imported guns. Ireland didn't particularly have one ever, so a lot of guns would have been imported.
Would they have been British made or European made?
Combination.
Or whatever,
Combination of.